There is a summer in the history of Real Madrid that the Madridistas are going to want to forget forever. It is the summer in which Florentino Pérez put money on the table to sign the two best midfielders in the world. And both said no. Both chose Barca. And the second just did it after receiving a call from someone that Florentino never expected to get involved in this negotiation. Stay until the end because you will discover how Florentino and Real Madrid are portrayed again. If you are a Cule, this is the video of your life. Barca did to Madrid something that Florentino had never experienced in the market. Like, subscribe and send it to that Madridista friend who always gives you the can because today he has to shut up. Let's start with the first one. For Rodri, for the midfielder who won the Ballon d'Or and who has just won the World Cup with Spain, being chosen the best player in the entire tournament. The player that Real Madrid had been trying to convince for months that Mourinho's project at the Bernabéu was the most suitable destination for the next stage of his professional career. The player to whom Florentino put an important and attractive economic offer on the table. An offer that any other player in his position would have accepted without thinking twice. Rodri rejected it. Not abruptly, not with a slap in the face. With the elegance and intelligence that characterize a player who has been the most mature in the dressing room of any team where he has played for years. In the conversations he had with the Madrid managers, Rodri always showed respect. He never closed the door on them. He never said a round no that would prevent them from continuing to work on the operation. But he never gave them the yes they needed. And in Valdebebas they know perfectly well what it means that a player does not transmit full conviction when you present a project to him. It means that that player is not going to sign, that he is looking the other way. That there is something else that attracts him more than what you are offering him, regardless of what he puts on the contract you put in front of him. What Rodri finally told them in the last conversation was something that the Madrid managers understood perfectly, although it hurt them to hear it so clearly. That he chose Barca without any doubt. That Flick's style of play convinced him much more than Mourinho's. That Guardiola's inheritance in the Catalan club's DNA was something that weighed heavily on his final decision. And that his close relationship with the Spanish national team's Cule players in recent years had created such a strong bond that made Barca feel like something completely natural for him, in a way that Madrid had never managed to convey to him at any time. Mourinho said he had solutions in the squad for that position. That it was not a drama, that Madrid has enough quality players to cover that demarcation without the need to sign Rodri. That the team's project does not depend on a single footballer, no matter how good that footballer is. Mourinho can say whatever he wants in the press, but the concrete and undeniable reality is that Madrid wanted Rodri. They wanted him for months. They had invested time, energy and money to convince him that the Bernabéu was his destiny. And Rodri chose Barca, the Spanish captain, world champion, the best midfielder on the planet, the Ballon d'Or. He chose Flick's project over Mourinho's project, without a doubt. That in football is called a very clear message. A message about where the most attractive project of European football is at this particular moment, and about what club has the real ability to attract the best players in the world, when Barca and Madrid are competing directly for the same name and the player has the freedom to choose. But the story of this summer for Real Madrid does not end with Rodri. It ends with something much bigger and even more painful for Florentino and for the White Club. Because at the exact moment in which Rodri officially communicated his decision to the Madrid leaders, Barca already had in mind the second best midfielder available on the market. The player that Madrid had internally identified as their plan B in case of not being able to convince Rodri. The midfielder, who at this moment has a very complicated situation in his current club, which makes his departure a real possibility, and very specific that the European market is following with enormous attention, which few operations generate in these summer weeks. And Madrid believed that this player was theirs almost with total security. That after losing Rodri, at least he would have the consolation of reinforcing the midfield with the second best midfielder in the world. That plan B would work perfectly even if plan A had failed in such a painful way. What happened next is what this channel tells you in the next part of this exclusive story, because Madrid not only lost the second midfielder they wanted, they lost him in a way that Florentino Pérez had never lived in all his years as president of the most awarded club in the history of football. And he lost it thanks to a phone call that no one inside the Bernabéu expected to happen at any time. A call between two people that Madrid never calculated that they were going to talk about the future of that desired player. There is something about Rodri's decision that deserves to be said in more depth before reaching the second boom of the story, which is going to leave Madridism speechless. Because Rodri did not choose Barca just because of the style of play or the relationship with the players of the national team. He chose Barca because at the moment Flick's project is the most exciting in European football, and any elite player who has the ability to chooses it. That is what Madrid does not want to admit publicly, but that in private its own leaders are very clear. That there is a serious problem of sports attraction that Mourinho has not been able to solve since he arrived at the Bernabéu bench. That the players who have the ability to freely choose between Madrid and another big one in Europe are choosing the other big one. That the image of the Madridista project among the best footballers in the world at this time is not by far what Florentino wanted it to be. Rodri said it indirectly but absolutely clearly when he explained his reasons. Guardiola's inheritance in Barca's DNA, Flick's style of play, the natural affinity with the cool players that he has built for years of coexistence in the Spanish national team. Each of these reasons is a veiled criticism, but perfectly legible, of the Madrid project. A football that at this time does not convince the best available players on the market. A dressing room that does not generate the same natural attraction that Flick's Barca generates at this time among the most talented and coveted midfielders on the entire planet. And that is what Florentino has to listen to right now. Not once, twice in the same summer. Because the second midfielder that Madrid wanted so urgently also chose Barca. He also said no to Florentino having an economic offer on the table. He also chose Flick's project over Mourinho's without thinking too much about it. And he did it after receiving a call that no one in Real Madrid expected to occur at any time. A call that changed everything in a matter of minutes. That name and that call is what we tell now in the next part of the story that this channel tells you exclusively before anyone else in the world of football. Enzo Fernandez. That is the name that Real Madrid did not expect to lose. The Argentine midfielder from Chelsea, who became Madrid's B plan after Rodri. The player who won the World Cup in Qatar with Argentina alongside Messi. The one who arrived at Chelsea in the winter of 2023 for €107 million, automatically becoming the most expensive signing in the history of the Premier League. The one who, under the orders of Xabi Alonso at Chelsea this season, has once again shown the extraordinary level that made him one of the most complete and most desired midfielders in all of world football. But Enzo Fernandez has a problem that has been news in England for weeks. A problem that has nothing to do with his football, but with something that happened during the celebration of the Copa America, where the midfielder was caught exhibiting a Malvinas flag and laughing at England with several teammates from the Argentine national team. That video reached social media, and in England it exploded with a virulence that few expected. English fans asked for his expulsion from Chelsea in a massive and organized way. High positions in the Premier League formally demanded Xabi Alonso to take urgent measures against the player. The pressure on the London club was so enormous and so sustained that, according to the sources this channel knows within Chelsea, Enzo Fernandez's position as an indisputable part of Xabi Alonso's project began to be compromised in a way that, just a few weeks ago, would have seemed completely impossible to anyone. Enzo Fernandez suddenly had a foot and a half completely out of the Premier League, almost irreversibly. Not because Xabi Alonso didn't want him in his project, but because the political and social pressure on the club was too great and too sustained to be indefinitely ignored, and Chelsea began to seriously listen to offers coming from a player who, in other completely normal circumstances, would never have been available in the signing market. Real Madrid saw this and acted immediately. Because for Madrid, Enzo Fernandez was exactly what he needed after losing to Rodri. A world-class midfielder with the ability to control the game and reach the area with the ball under control. A player with proven international experience. A world champion who knew what it meant to win the biggest tournament on the planet. And above all, a player who, at this time, was available at a price that Chelsea was willing to negotiate given the complicated context that surrounded the player. Madrid's managers began immediate contact with Enzo Fernandez's environment. They prepared an attractive economic proposal. They were absolutely convinced that after the painful defeat to Rodri, this operation would finally go well and would give them the peace that Mourinho needed so much in midfield to start the season with guarantees. What Madrid didn't know was that Barca also knew it. that Laporta and Deco had been following Enzo Fernandez's situation with the same attention for days, and that Barca had made a decision that Madrid had never calculated, that they were going to ask Messi for help directly to convince Enzo. Leo Messi, the best player in the history of football without any possible discussion. Enzo Fernandez's partner in the Argentine national team for years. The one who lifted the Qatar World Cup trophy next to him with tears in his eyes. The player who has the most influence over any Argentine player who is making an important decision about his career. Laporta personally called Messi. He explained the situation in detail. He told him that Barca urgently wanted Enzo Fernandez, that Madrid had also activated their contacts to go for him, and that if Messi had the opportunity to speak directly to Enzo and tell him what Barca represented for him during all the years he was in the club, that could be the completely decisive factor in a negotiation that was promised to be very even between the two great Spanish clubs. Messi accepted without hesitation for a single second. According to sources close to the player's environment that this channel knows exclusively, Messi called Enzo Fernandez that same afternoon without waiting any longer. A long conversation that lasted more than 20 intense minutes, in which Messi spoke to him about Barca with a passion and clarity that, according to the same sources, even surprised Enzo himself, who knew perfectly well Leo's deep relationship with the Catalan club, but who did not expect the genuine intensity with which the Argentine defended that project in every minute of that call. Messi spoke to him about the Flick style, what it means to play in the Camp Nou, Pedri, Gabi and Rodri himself, who had just chosen that same project, rejecting Madrid, and asked him if he could imagine playing with all of them in the center of the most powerful field in the world. Enzo Fernandez listened to everything that Messi said with total attention during those 20 minutes. And when the call ended, according to the sources that this channel knows exclusively, his decision was already completely taken. He called his agent immediately that same night. He told him that he wanted Barca without any doubt or possible step back. And his agent called Chelsea to tell them that the player had already chosen his next destination definitively. Days later, Enzo Fernandez picked up the phone and called Florentino Pérez directly to tell him something that the president of Madrid had never heard from any player of that level in all his years at the head of the club, that he chose FC Barcelona over Real Madrid, with all the clarity in the world. There is something about Messi's call that deserves to be said before the final outcome of this story, because Messi did not call Enzo as a personal favor at the door, nor out of commitment. Messi called because he genuinely believes that Flick's Barca is the best European football project. At this time, because he genuinely wanted an Argentinian teammate whom he appreciates and respects to make the right decision for his sports career. That says something very important about the weight of Barca in the world of football, which goes far beyond the signings and the millions in the market. Barca has Messi convincing the best players in the world that Flick's project is the right destination for their careers. That has no price in any market in the world. That cannot be bought with Florentino's money or with the years of history of Madrid. That is something that Barca has built for decades with its philosophy, and that this summer is bearing fruit in such a way that the fans of the club had been waiting for years to see with their own eyes. Finally see. Real Madrid wanted the two best midfielders in the world this summer, without exception. Barca took them both one after the other without Madrid being able to do anything to avoid it. And to take the second, they had the direct help of the best player in the history of football, who turns out to be a heartthrob, although now he plays for Inter in Miami, thousands of kilometers from Camp Nou. That is also Barca, more than a club. It has always been since Cruyff built it like this, and this summer he is demonstrating it in such a way that Madridism will take a long time to be able to explain without hurting each word they pronounce. What happened in that Bernabéu office after that call and the brutal consequences for two Madrid leaders, including one of the best-known names in all of European football, is what we tell right now in the last part of this story. Florentino Pérez hung up the phone after talking to Enzo Fernandez, and what happened in the following minutes within the most powerful office of Spanish football is something that, according to sources close to the club's environment that this channel knows, had never happened in all the years that Florentino has been at the head of Real Madrid. The president of the most awarded club in the history of football had just received, in the same summer, 2 negatives from the 2 best midfielders in the world. 2 players to whom he had presented important economic offers. 2 players who had listened to his project and who had said no. Both, one after the other, to go to Barca. That is not an accident, that is not bad luck, that is a signal, a very clear signal about something that Florentino does not want to admit in public but that in private, according to the sources that this channel knows, is generating a rage that he had not felt for years with that intensity within his own club. The question that Florentino asked himself in that office after hanging up the phone was not why Enzo had chosen Barca. The question was why his managers had not been able to present an offer attractive enough so that Enzo at least doubted before making his decision. Why had the negotiation process not generated in the player the feeling that Madrid was willing to do absolutely everything necessary to get it? Why, after losing to Rodri, Madrid had lost again to the next on the same list in the same way? And the answer that Florentino found to those questions had specific names. Within Real Madrid there is a work structure that manages the negotiations with the players that the club wants to sign. A structure that Florentino has built for years, and in which he trusts that the operations that he considers to be priority are executed with the efficiency and speed that the most important club in the world demands. And according to the sources that this channel knows, that structure failed in the case of Enzo Fernandez in a way that Florentino considered unacceptable. The two managers in charge of managing the negotiation with Enzo's environment did not make the offer that Florentino had ordered to be made. Not in the terms that the president considered necessary to compete with what Barca was putting on the table. Not with the urgency that the situation required given the pressure surrounding the player in Chelsea, and that made the window of opportunity to sign him narrower than usual. Florentino called the two managers to his office. The conversation that took place in that meeting, according to the sources that this channel knows, was brief, very brief. Florentino is not known for giving long speeches when he is angry. He is known for being direct, for saying what he thinks without beating around the bush and without leaving room for interpretation. He told them that they had failed, that their job was to make sure that when Real Madrid wanted a player, the player felt the weight of that interest in a way that made it very difficult to say no, that this had not happened with Rodri and that it had not happened with Enzo either, and that in Real Madrid, two failures of that magnitude in the same summer had consequences. One of the two managers that Florentino expelled from the club is Juni Calafat, the same Calafat that for years has been considered one of the best talent hunters in European football. The man who signed Vinicius, the one who signed Rodrigo, the one who identified Valverde when no one in Europe spoke of him, the one who built a very important part of the Madrid squad that won 4 Champions League titles in 8 years. One of the most respected and best-known managers in European football in his work. Florentino expelled him from the club after the failed negotiation with Enzo Fernandez. That says absolutely everything about the level of anger that the president of Madrid reached when he hung up the phone after talking to Enzo. Because firing Calafat is not a decision that is taken hotly or impulsively. It is a decision that has consequences within the club that go far beyond the specific negotiation that failed. Calafat had been building relationships with agents, clubs, players from all over the world for years. His departure leaves a gap in Madrid's scouting that is not filled with an emergency hiring. But Florentino made that decision anyway, because for the president of Madrid, the message that Florentino sends inside the club when something fails at this level matters more than any consideration about the damage that the departure of a manager can cause in the short term. The message that Florentino sent to all those who work in the Real Madrid structure with the departure of these two managers was clear. That in Madrid things are done well or they are paid. That when the president considers that someone has failed in something as important as the signing of the two best midfielders in the world, the consequences are immediate and without margin for negotiation. While all that was happening inside the Bernabéu, Barca was closing the details of Enzo Fernandez's contract with Chelsea. 60 million euros of transfer, a 4-season contract, and the most brutal midfielder that any Cule fan had imagined having in the same team. Rodri, Pedri, Gabi, Enzo Fernandez. The 4 best midfielders in the world in the same team with Flick on the bench, in the Camp Nou renovated with Lamine Yamal on the right and Rafinha on the left with the 2 best ends in the world and the best midfielder on the planet. Meanwhile, Mourinho speaks in the press about solutions in the squad. That's football this summer. That's the difference between Barca and Madrid in this market. Barca wanted the 2 best midfielders in the world, and they have them. Madrid wanted them too, and they don't have any. And to make sure that the second would choose Barca, Laporta counted on the help of Messi, the greatest player in the history of football, who from Miami made a 20-minute call that changed the European summer. There is something about this summer that deserves to be said before closing it, about what it means for the Cule fans who have been watching for years how Madrid took signings that Barca wanted. Years in which the Madrid project seemed more attractive to the best players in the world than the Azulgrana project. Years in which Florentino could call any player on the planet and that player answered the call with the expectation that what he was going to hear was an impossible offer to reject. That time is definitely over this summer. Not because Madrid has lost its centenary history, not because the Bernabéu has ceased to be one of the most impressive stadiums in the world, not because the titles of Madrid have disappeared, but because there is a project on the other side of the classic that at this moment is more exciting, more coherent, and more attractive for the best players in the world than what Mourinho is building at the Bernabéu. Flick has built something at Barca that goes beyond the results and the signings. He has created an identity, a way of playing that the best midfielders in the world recognize as the closest to what they want to do with a ball. The inheritance of Guardiola that Rodri mentioned when he explained his reasons is not an accident. It is the result of years of work, of a philosophy that Barca has defended even in the most difficult moments of its recent history. And this summer, that philosophy won in the most forceful way possible. It won Rodri, it won Enzo, it won the whole summer against Madrid. Subscribe and like it because what comes with this Barca is going to be the most exciting story of European football in the coming years, and this channel is going to tell you before anyone else.